Lynn Cullen live in 1 minute. Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Yeah, I've been reduced to a mailbox. Lynn at pghcitypaper.com. So remember last week we read the obit of, one of you sent it in, of the guy who came up with that. Who came up with the whole concept of email. Do you realize how much our lives have changed in such a short period of time? It changed in such massive ways, in ways that affect basic human interaction, and it really is amazing. It's amazing more of us aren't totally insane now. It's a lot to ask of people. For most of human history, people were not asked this. They were not asked to change the way they talk to each other or communicate. I mean, for most of human history, you just did what you always did. And it's really been very recently that those dang scientists and free thinkers have come up with all this stuff that has just blown everything up. And we're constantly scrambling to catch up and to retain a sense of self and a sense of balance. It's no wonder people are voting for Donald Trump. Well, I hope you enjoyed the glorious weekend, and looks like a glorious week. I hope it's a good one for us all. I must say, however, that reading the news over the weekend did not coincide or didn't fit comfortably with the blue skies and the wonderful warmth. The news was, I got to tell you, you really should try to put everything in perspective as much as possible. I shouldn't say you. I should put things in perspective, because my life is like some wondrous fairy tale compared to what so many people have to live. And I just can't believe how we're given to lamentation and complaint constantly. And life's tough for most people, I think. I don't know. I read this stuff and I think, wow, what? Okay, for instance, can you do this with me? Did you know this amazing story? I did not know this one. Hit me right between the eyes. I think it was it front page in the Post-Gazette? Might have been. But it was totally front page, above the fold, New York Times, Sunday. And the Post-Gazette reprinted part of it. So if all you read was the local paper, you missed some stuff of this amazing story about Georgetown University. Georgetown University, Catholic school, Jesuit school, and how it survived its sort of rocky beginnings. So you have a bunch of priests in the, that have created this this college at the time, and it's unclear, I think, from the story, unless I missed it, when Georgetown was first established. But by 1838, Georgetown University was on real thin ice. 1838. Didn't know if it was going to make it. It had debt well beyond its ability to handle. It was suffering in every way, and whether or not it could continue its mission was very much up in the air. The priest who headed it at the time came up with an idea of how to save the school. And the way he saved Georgetown was by selling off some stock the school owned. Livestock the school owned. Human livestock. Slaves. So Georgetown University, college at the time, decided to sell en masse its 272 slaves. Now, in order for this to happen, they had to have the okay of the authorities who oversaw the Jesuits in Rome. And obviously, and stop and think about it. We were talking about how communication has changed. This would take a while, right, to get the message to Rome that this is what we want to do, and for Rome to then respond. Stop and think. I mean, it would take, what, months for each communication to occur? Back in the day, you had time to think. You had time you dealt with uncertainty and not knowing things all the time. Us, it's like, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, they send off a letter to the guys in Rome and say, this is what we got to do. And the guy who headed the Jesuits in Rome said this back. It would be better to suffer financial disaster than suffer the loss of our souls with the sale of the slaves. So, this is mind-blowing because, okay, so the guy in Rome finds it immoral somehow to sell these slaves, but apparently not immoral to own them. And in fact, at that time, the Catholic Church did not view the ownership of other human beings as immoral. 1830, what did I say, 8? And so it's not as if they hadn't sold slaves before. They just never sold this huge a bundle. There are records that as early as the 1780s, the Jesuits were openly discussing, get this, the need to cull their stock of human beings. But there was something about selling all of them or almost all of them, that like freaked the guys in Rome out. So this goes back and forth. In Georgetown, they're not accepting this decision. And they persuade Rome that they will do it, and they will do it in a moral manner. The guy in charge here promised Rome that the slaves would continue to practice their Catholicism, that families would not be separated, and that any money, any money raised would not be used to pay off debt or operating expenses. He said, don't worry, we won't do any of that. Apparently all of that was considered, a deal breaker. So they're given the okay. Needless to say, they broke every promise. Not one of the conditions were met. The head of Georgetown was called back to Rome after the slaves had been sold and was, God knows where, reassigned. But get this. The very next year, the Pope, one Gregory the 16th, explicitly barred Catholics from engaging in, quote, this traffic in blacks, no matter what the pretext or excuse, end quote. So this sale of all of these human beings actually did cause the church, in the person of the Pope, to say the church, no Catholic, can do this anymore. Not that that stopped him. So who were these 272 souls? Oh my. They were grandmothers and grandfathers and carpenters and blacksmiths and pregnant women and infants. They were scared out of their minds. They were bewildered. They were despairing. And there were eyewitnesses to them being loaded onto ships. And they reported that children were sold without their parents. Slaves were dragged off by force. 2 managed to escape. An elderly woman fell to her knees begging to know what she had done to deserve such a fate. But they were sold. And off they went to Louisiana. Now, this fact was pretty well known, I guess, in Georgia. I mean, I didn't know that. Did you know that? I didn't know that. Anyway, now, Georgetown, this is big news. Georgetown, the university, is now weighing what it should do. What should it do for this Is there some recompense? What do you do? There's a bill of sale right here. I can read from it. Know all men, very good handwriting, know all men by these presents that I, Thomas F. Maletti, that's the priest who headed Georgetown, of Georgetown, District of Columbia, have bargained and sold, and by these presents do bargain and sell, and deliver unto Jesse Beatty of the parish of Terrebonne, state of Louisiana, 64 Negroes. So this was just one part of the sale. To wit, Nace Butler, 50 years, Bibby, 45, and her infant, Carolyn, 16, Basil, 14, Martha Ann, 12, Ann, 10, Gabe, 9, BB, 8, and then it cuts off. Okay. One of the people sold was a guy named Cornelius Hawkins. He was about 13 years old. Nobody really knew he was sold. 13 years old. The reason we now know something more about actually Cornelius is because an alum of Georgetown, knowing this history, found it so repellent, such an outrage, that he said, we at least must trace. We have their names. We know where they were sold. We have to trace these people and find their descendants and make recompense. This guy is just a business guy, I think, from Massachusetts. He hired a bunch of genealogists. Meanwhile, Georgetown, people in Georgetown were sort of working in the same vein. And between these two, trying to get some answers, they have started to track down descendants. And the picture on the front page of the New York Times is a woman in her 60s standing in a graveyard, standing at the foot of a toppled stone on which is written, Neely Hawkins, died April 16th, 1902. Neely is Cornelius. He was called Neely. She said, we have Neely still in our family. I did not know about him. When she was contacted by this effort, she was blown away. She still lives very much near the plantation that 13-year-old child, who is her great-great-grandfather, I believe, was sold off to. So this effort has traced more than 200 of the slaves from Maryland to Louisiana. They believe there are thousands, obviously, thousands of descendants. A few have been contacted by now, but they intend to contact all. What does Georgetown do? Well, Georgetown is weighing whether it should apologize for profiting from these human beings. That's a no-brainer. I mean, that's a discussion that should take, what, a millisecond? They're also wondering whether they should create a memorial to the slaves. Yeah. They are also debating whether to provide free education to their descendants. That would be a real good idea. And as one historian who knows this history all too well said, it's hard to know what could possibly reconcile a history like this. What can you do to make amends? So I read this, and it just rips your heart out and stuns you. But why? We know about slavery. We know that's part of our history. Why? And I think it's because anytime these human stock have names and families and histories of their own, it becomes something you can get your head around a little bit more, right? But reading this, reacting to it, and then thinking about amends, and thinking about our current racial difficulties, and the obstinance with which so many of us refuse to deal with what we owe, whether we own slaves or not. Georgetown is hardly alone in why did they have slaves? Well, they had slaves to do the work, to grow the crops, to this and that. They had slaves, yeah. Who didn't? But it brings up this issue of reparations, because what seems just here in this smaller microcosm, we know we're talking about 272 people who were treated like cattle. 272 people. And we know their names. And we're now tracing them as much as we can. And Celine, I could tell from her, and we think, no brainer, you bet you give their descendants free education, free tuition, board, everything. But then if that's true, what is it that we owe all the other descendants of men and women who were owned by Americans, sold, had their families ripped apart? What if we think, obviously, Georgetown owes these people something, what do we owe all the others? And I know whenever the subject of reparations comes up, people say, well, how do you do that? I mean, how? And it's, I don't know. But in reading this story, if you're ripped apart by the horror of these people's existence and by the utter immorality of the common economics of the time, then how is that not true for the every single black person you see walking around in the city? They have a story. If we could trace them back, every one of them's got stories, or not, because they don't know, because their histories have been sort of wiped out. The only reason, strangely, they've been able to trace as many of these slaves as they have is, guess what? Because the Jesuits converted them all to Catholicism, and that Catholicism stuck. And so even after they were freed, after the Civil War, they sought out churches, sought out priests, married in the church. Records were kept by the Catholic Church. That's not true of an awful lot of slaves and former slaves. I don't know. But so that is one story that here's the lead, by the way. I'll give you the lead because it's a hell of a read. The human cargo was loaded on ships at a bustling wharf in the nation's capital, destined for plantations of the Deep South. Some slaves pleaded for rosaries as they were rounded up, praying for deliverance. But on this day, in the fall of 1838, no one was spared. Not the 2-month-old baby and her mother, not the field hands, not the shoemaker, and not Cornelius Hawkins, who was about 13 years old when he was forced on board. Then, this is my Sunday reading. So then, I'm reading the local paper, and in the forum section of the local paper, the Post-Gazette, they do a last page, and it's always it's different every time, but it's specifically zeroes in on something historical, something whatever, interesting often. And yesterday, what it was a story about Native Americans who were rounded up and sent from their homes and families to Carlisle, Pennsylvania. They came from everywhere in the country. Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Children, where when they got to the place in Carlisle, their pictures were taken in their native clothes. And then a year or two later, their pictures are taken again, transformed into regular people. There's one in particular that just freaks me out. I wonder if this will show at all. I'm going to try. Not very well. But this man in the first picture is so magnificent. He is magnificent in his garb, in the fierceness and beauty of his face and expression. He's a Navajo. The year's 1882. The other picture of him was taken 3 years later. His hair shorn. Strangely, his skin lightened. But it turns out that what they did was they did things with light to actually make these darker-skinned Indians look whiter. This was a progressive thing that was going on. This was run by well-meaning people who figured the Native Americans were goners. They lost. They lost. Their land had been taken, their culture, their homes, everything. And so if they were going to make it, they had to join the majority culture. And these were well-intentioned. This is like what happened to the Aboriginals in Australia. Did you ever see that marvelous movie? What is it called? Rabbit Proof Fence? Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Because this happened there, too. They rounded up these Aboriginal children, stuck them in these, and tried to make them white. And you can't look at these pictures without your heart just being ripped out of your body. So this occurs about 50 years after these slaves were sold to help Georgetown pay its debts. And this that was happening here in Pennsylvania was a well-intentioned effort to save these people's lives. Needless to say, a lot of them. If you want to start doing individual stories about what happened to the faces, the represented here, the people represented here, your heart would be ripped apart. So, what? Oh, you want this? Here. So on Sunday, on this beautiful sunny day, I finished reading about the slaves. Then I turn to this, and I think, wow, it's hard not to start engaging in some heavy thought about us, about human beings, and about the trauma that we impose on each other, and how in both cases good people are involved, I suspect. And then, dear God. And then there's a story in the national section of the New York Times, and I'm looking at another portrait of American people. And this is of a husband, wife, and their 3 children. I am told they're all from Bolivia, and none of them are American citizens except the youngest boy. The youngest child in the family was born here. He's an American citizen. His parents, his 2 siblings, are not. They are all essentially illegal. The father is a carpenter. He's gainfully employed. The mother also works. The kids, all 3 children, are as American as they come. They've all grown up here. Their language is English. And yet, they face the possibility of separation from each other, of being grabbed. The mother says she's afraid to go out of the house because she's so terrified that she could be snatched. It says here, she cleans houses, but even after more than a decade here, she is reluctant to leave the house. I worry that I might go out tomorrow morning and never see my children again. The reason this story is here is that today, actually in about a half hour, the Supreme Court of the United States, sitting in all its august splendor, will be hearing arguments about whether or not the president, Barack Obama's directive to allow families like this to stop living in terror, to allow them a path to stay here, and as long as they're, squeaky clean, which this family is, and most are. The largest of the parts of this thing that's up for review in front of the Supreme Court today would benefit this family I'm looking at, and would allow them, if they pass all the checks and have no criminal records, would allow them to become legal residents. Not necessarily citizens, but legal residents, and would take this fear that lives with them 24 hours a day away. The case was brought by something like 22 state governments, including Texas, of course, who say, president can't do that, and we want to throw these people out. The Supreme Court will be hearing this today, and somehow all of this, everything I've talked about this morning, it's all of a piece. It feels like it's all the same story in some ways. some more horrific chapters than others. But it's all about human beings, good human beings that you can totally relate to, that just like us, just like you, just like your family. Only they, by accident of birth and time of place, whatever, find themselves living in a nightmare. Powerless. And waiting for the government, the overseers, to tell them whether they can have to continue sleeping with one eye open, whether this woman can go to the store and not be looking around her, fearful that she'll be grabbed. So there's a whole bunch of Americans today whose lives, whose futures are on the line as the Supreme Court hears these arguments. And I don't know about their chances. I don't know because, as you know, we do not have the ability to have any more of those 5-4 decisions. We now, because of Scalia's demise, have 4-4 decisions. If there's a 4-4 decision in this case, it drops down to whatever the last court who had it found. And in this case, it's not good for these people. So I just want to, because that's one of the things happening today in the news. And I thought, doesn't that put it in some perspective? And can you handle one more? This is all in yesterday's news. Every bit of it. As a matter of fact, every one of these stories, except the one I just shared, although there was some, it was all in any paper you picked up. Maybe. But I think I started the show by talking about I need to keep things in perspective more. Perspective is something that is very elusive often, right? And I think it's really hard to maintain it, even if you're capable of finding perspective. It's hard to maintain it on a sort of constant, basis. If there's a moment of perspective that you reach once a day, that's like you get a high five. Because generally speaking, we can live months of our lives without indulging in any perspective. We're so caught up, more, I think, than any people in history, so caught up in our own lives. So that's why I say whenever, I read the paper, granted, it depresses the hell out of me half the time, but it sure makes me feel like I'm living some kind of a dream. I have not suffered like all of these people. I have not known terror like these people. And when you realize the terror that these people feel is inflicted upon them by us. Maybe not individually me. I didn't take any of those Native American kids and send them to Carlisle. I didn't own those slaves. I didn't sell those slaves. I did not, say to these poor Bolivian family, wherever, that, I didn't. But my government, my people, my culture, America did and does. So in my name, okay, there's another story. And this one is way too complicated to get in too much. Suffice to say, I'm just going to give you one little thing that blew me away from it. Why are we always seeing pictures of people? Because as soon as you can see people, stories start to become real. Inasmuch as we're talking about hundreds, thousands, blah, 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 and there are no pictures, no faces, no stories that you can identify, it's hard to feel anything, any connection. But give me the pictures, give me some facts, and then there's power. So yesterday in the Sunday Post-Gazette, there's a story, front page, about an African woman from Cameroon, I believe, who has been here in Pittsburgh for like almost 2 years. She's got children back in Cameroon. She has a husband. This is her family. This is the woman. The woman in red. All of those boys, there's 4 beautiful boys. Those are her kids and her husband. She left them to come and get another child who she feels belongs with her family. That is the child of her sister. 2 of these boys in this picture are also the children of that same sister who was living in Westmoreland County and had these 2 boys. The sister seems like she's obviously a piece of work. Yeah, not capable. This woman left her family way back then, came over to Westmoreland County, dealt with the child welfare people there, and took those 2 boys back home to Cameroon with her, where they are thriving, where now they are, you can't tell the difference between those 2 and her boys. They're all family. Everybody's happy as hell. And her culture tells her that her sister's children are her children. And that to not have a child back in the family, if to know that a child that is her responsibility is not in her arms, is unbearable. So she has left her kids to come and retrieve a daughter that this woman, the sister, gave birth to after the 2 boys. Only this time she didn't give birth in Westmoreland County. She gave birth in Allegheny County. And so enter Allegheny Child and Youth Services. An Allegheny County Orphans Court. And the nightmare is beyond belief. I'm just going to tell you one thing. The little girl in question has now lived in Penn Hills with a foster mother for, I believe, 2.5 or 3 years. And by all accounts, that kid thinks that woman is her mom. The judge, one Guido DeAngelis, seems strangely biased against this African woman. I mean, from everything that has been quoted in the article. He even imposed a gag order in this case, which is very odd. Very odd. But I just want to tell you one thing. One thing. The child, the little girl, is with this family in Penn Hills. right now. The son, the adult son of the girl's foster mom, okay, is one Charles Cuttery. And according to court records, this Charles Cuttery attacked his ex-girlfriend in March of 2006, threatening to kill her, cutting off her clothes while her 18-month-old son was in the house. 7 weeks later, the guy shows up at her door. She opens the door, and he fires a single shot into her chest. She survives. He pled guilty to attempted homicide, aggravated assault, reckless endangerment, and aggravated indecent assault. He went to prison, but he's already out. He also is on the watch list for people who have committed sexual crimes. He goes to the house often where this little child is staying. The woman in the house loves the girl and wants to adopt her. I think that there might be a hearing actually this week, maybe today, going on too. The judge seems so inclined, CYS seems inclined, Kid's Voice seems inclined to give this woman the child as her own child, even though she has a son who she describes as a very loving person, who visits the home with some regularity. I want to find the quote from the judge. Oh, he is a Megan's Law offender, so he's got to register. He's not supposed to be around kids. And listen to what the caseworker, this is what the CYS caseworker says. She testified that she did not know the charges about the son. Here's what the caseworker said. I asked the mother if he had a criminal record, and she said yes. And she really doesn't like to talk about it. So I didn't push any further. What? What? All right. Also, one of the other attorneys, this one for Kid's Voice, was heard saying during a recess that sounds so racist, so biased, so xenophobic, you cannot believe it. He said about giving the child to his aunt, the Cameroon woman, he said, "You'd have that kid picking fucking coca beans." Anyway, the judge also says that he didn't see a problem with the fact that this guy, the judge doesn't see a problem with the son being a Megan's Law offender, doesn't see any problem with putting this child in this house and not giving it to a blood relative where that girl has two brothers. They're in Cameroon. If she were to go to Cameroon, she would be united with her family. This woman it doesn't sound like she has a chance. The judge has criticized the African woman's attorneys for raising the issue of the son's criminal background. A CYF caseworker said it doesn't have any bearing on the adoption. Oh, really? I'm an adoptive parent. Let me tell you the kinds of hoops you jump through to become an adoptive parent. And let me tell you, I dealt with Orphans Court here. I dealt with CYS here. And I dealt with Federal Immigration Naturalization Service. I dealt with bureaucracies in Bolivia. And what the worst of the worst, it wasn't the third world country of Bolivia. It was not INS, which I had to deal with. It was not any of that. It was not the state of Pennsylvania, which I also had to deal with. The most obfuscating, obstinate, and just plain nuts bureaucracy that I encountered was Allegheny County. It seemed as if there were people that were just put in place to torture you. They drew out something that should have taken for years. I was an American. I was living here. I was even somebody. This poor woman. God, jeez. So I think the overall theme here is the oppression of those in power and the way they can mess with human life and get away with it time and time and time again. So, on a beautiful day yesterday, I was sitting there looking at the spring coming on and thinking about this stuff. Today, there are people whose lives hang in the balance, and men and women in black robes have their lives in their hands. And some of those people in those black robes are not very nice people. Or they're not competent people. Or they're drunk on their own power. I don't know. By the way, the woman from Cameroon, lest you have xenophobic and racist tendencies as well, and you're assuming that the child would be picking coca beans. Her husband is an architect. She is a teacher. She's lost her job since she came here. They are very strongly middle class, maybe a little upper middle class. This is a probably more stable home made up of more consequential humans than the woman in Penn Hills, who the last time she parented somebody turned out a killer, would-be killer. This is the woman you give the kid to? Or do you give her to the teacher and architect and blood relative and the mother now of her two brothers, who since they were taken from Westmoreland County, which, by the way, no problem. No problem. Westmoreland County, that works. Smooth as can be. People worked with her, yada yada. Here, it's like hitting it. They remind me of a bad police department. It's sort of the same sense you get. I pity anyone who ends up in the claws of any social services from Allegheny County having to do with custody or anything, because every peek I have had at that system is like dropping in to a combination Charles Dickens, Franz Kafka novel. nightmare. Well, needless to say, I wish these people, all people now who are hanging on all of these courts, I wish them all the best, but I wouldn't count on it. Lynn, Beth writes, how is the president judge of Allegheny County Common Pleas Court not getting involved in this case? Oh, wait, it's Jeffrey Manning, who's known to have his own racial bias. Feel awful for that woman from Cameroon. What a way to say welcome to America. Yeah. Yeah, she's stunned. Extremely articulate, well-spoken, elegant kind of a woman, I must say. Wow. And because she spoke out, watch this judge. He could jail her today. He said, there was a I put a gag order on this. Yeah. Could. A quick obit. Jay Dantry, the founder, former owner of the now gone Jay. It's gone, isn't it? Jay's Bookstore. It's not there anymore in Oakland. Did anybody take it over? Jay's Bookstall on Fifth Avenue. Anyway, quite a Pittsburgh icon by all accounts. I think I met him once, but I didn't really. A wonderful guy, and he's now gone. I just wanted to note it. And his significant other says, if you want to honor him, read a book. He said he read 7 books a week. How can you do that? You can't read a book a day. Yeah, but you had to be every once in a while waiting on somebody. You mean you could read? I don't know how you do that. I mean, some maybe it averaged out, but some had to be pretty thin. I just can't imagine doing that. Also, an interesting thing by the way, medical marijuana passes in Pennsylvania. Don't get all excited. It'll take almost 2 years for this to be implemented because there again, your government works like a rusty old Rube Goldberg machine. But obviously a sense of hope for people who suffer from a whole bunch of things that marijuana can ameliorate, alleviate, and help. It is one of the greatest plants God ever made. So the other thing that I noted in the news over the weekend was this guy from Range Resources. Did you see what he said? He said it behind closed doors, but it got out. Oh my! Did you see this? Oh my God. He's the vice president for legislative and regulatory affairs for Range Resources. He told some gathering in Harrisburg that Range Resources tries to avoid putting its fracking wells anywhere near big houses. He said they don't put them in wealthier neighborhoods because people living in big houses have the financial resources to challenge them and take them to court. Now, he's just saying what everybody knows, but you're not supposed to say it. And he has said it out loud, that what Range Resources does, and what I'm sure they all do, is they stick their wells in poor neighborhoods where people do not have the resources to take on a behemoth oil company. And so, big shock. Anyway, everybody's hooting and hollering and screaming and yelling that they're calling for investigations. Hey, by the way, speaking of fracking, it can't have been more than, 5 years ago? 6 years ago that fracking sort of came here in big, wasn't it? Just the other day? When we learned what fracking was, and we learned we were sitting on this gold mine, and we learned nothing would ever be the same in Pennsylvania, that this was going to make us extraordinarily rich. And then in they came, and our government, our state government under Corbett, couldn't give Range Resources and these other guys enough. We didn't take much from them. We couldn't, destroy our roads, destroy our streams, destroy our this, have, poison the aquifer. It's okay. There's money to be made. Have you noticed? The boom's over. Have you noticed? There was another story in the paper about some guy who bought up a bunch of hotels in the areas where the fracking was going on because he knew people were, I'm going to make money. I'm making money on this. He's already trying to sell them. Boy, hey, Corbett, I thought we were going to be rolling in dough for the rest of our natural lives. How long did that thing last? 5 years? 6 years? What? I'm just saying. Okay, guys. That's it for me today. Hey, by the way, if you haven't seen the Anita Hill thing called Confirmation on HBO, check it out. Boy, is that a blast from the past. And boy, does it remind you of something you lived through. And man, is it well done. I recommend it. Okay? Tomorrow.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.